I'm live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. And I'm live reading Scent of Water. We started, I think, which day did we start? I think we started like 2-3 days ago of Monday. Well, we started reading Scent of Water. I just got this new copy from Amazon yesterday. I was like, I shouldn't be reading the draft that they gave that I got. So I got a new copy. Very well. I mean, like very clean, nice. Anyway, so Scent of Water is a novel written by moi, Simisola Ogoyinka, and by popular demand, you all said I should read it first. And it's the first of other titles that I'm going to be reading. Okay, so sorry, something just popped up on my screen now. I don't know what that is. Anyway, I said I'm going to be giving us tea. Today, again, I have my water in a mug and a refill ready. So I said I was going to give us a tea. And today, let me talk about drinking water. So sometime last year, trying to get healthier and all that, I hated drinking water. I mean, like some days I will have maybe just 1 cup in a day, like it was bad. So I said, I saw this 3-liter bottle and I told myself, Simi, today, try and drink this 3-liter bottle, finish it. So I got the 3-liter bottle of water and yes, I started drinking it. And by the end of the day, I finished. I was like, okay, that wasn't so bad. So I started giving myself the 3-liter limit. Every day I would drink 3 liters of water. Guess what? I lost weight. I started losing weight seriously. Like people see me and are like, what are you doing? I say, I'm drinking water. So, well, if you need to lose weight, I'm not a dietitian or a doctor or a nurse practitioner or anything. I'm just someone who drank water and it helped me to feel better and lose weight. So if you want to take my tea, go ahead. All right, so let's go into Scent of Water. And I'm starting from chapter 19. Let's get this in place. All right. Chapter 19. The prisoner was escorted out of the Black Maria, handcuffed and leg cuffed. He was partly shocked at the crowd that waited outside the courtroom. He'd thought this kind of thing would not happen here. Mobile policemen in uniform and mufti were scattered all over the premises, some with their walkie-talkies. Prison officials flanked him as he was led into the court, partly to secure the prisoner and partly to dissuade the press who ran toward the Black Maria as soon as it arrived, all in a bid to catch the first glimpse of the multi-millionaire turned felon. Microphones and recorders from NTA, CRBC, and several other media houses were tossed in Mike's face as he made his slow entrance into the premises of the Federal High Court. He'd been through this before. He hated every inch of it, but he'd never had such a crowd of witnesses. He wasn't sure how he really felt about the publicity. Do you hope to be freed? Mr. Dabi, is it true some of your friends in government are pushing for your release? Is it true you hired your new lawyer under duress? What is the part of your family in this, sir? Where is Mrs. Dabi? What is your relationship with Esam Bassey, sir? Mike walked slowly through the crowd at the entrance of the courthouse. The prison wardens tried to prod him to move faster, but he refused. TV cameras were everywhere, and he was not ready to be dragged into the court while the whole nation watched with their sumptuous dinners before them. He knew these TV stations. If he stumbled once, it would be the only caption they would show. He hated them with a passion. The media had worked for him before when the going was good. Now they worked against him. He knew it would be no use to make comments. Some of those TV stations, in a bid to stay in competition, had gone for 24 hours on air, and since they were not buoyant enough to buy a wide variety of programs, they repeat their news. What picture those cameramen were shooting will be replayed over the next few days at close interval. He was taken into the courtroom through a side entrance and led into the dock situated behind the seats of his lawyer and the prosecution. Effiong was seated with the young law assistants that worked with him. They made a very brief eye contact, and Effiong nodded briskly at him. The courtroom was packed to the fullest. The crowd murmured as he was led to take his place in the dock where he would stay throughout the proceeding. The prosecutors were already seated also. The chief prosecutor was a rotund man who was obviously feeding from more illegal sources than was legal. He whispered several times to his two colleagues who were seated with him, occasionally dabbing at his forehead as the sweat gathered. Mike had only one face in mind, and he searched hungrily through the faces in the crowd. He found her, eyes glued on him, and his demeanor softened a little. He was a little angry with her. She had promised to resume the monthly visits, but had missed the very next visit after her promise. Her eyes spoke volumes, and he stopped for a second to swim in the depths of them. A police officer prodded him, and he stumbled forward, keeping his eyes on her. She had thankfully sat at the side of the court hall where he wouldn't need to turn all round to see her. He kept his eyes on her, drawing strength from her till he couldn't look anymore. His heart beat fast. He was settled into the dock, and he turned sideways to keep the conversation alive between himself and Essa. She did not say a word, did not even mouth a word, but his whole body shuddered from the effects of the unspoken words between them. The court clerk called the attention of the court to the arrival of the judge, a thin woman who looked tired of her job. Mike pulled his gaze away from Esam to look at the woman who would determine his fate. He hated female judges, always had. One, he had presided over his first case and handed down the ultimate penalty. Ephraim had tried to encourage him that female judges were were fairer than their male counterparts. He still hated them all the same. After all, three male judges had heard his appeal, and he got a retrial. Besides, this female judge had denied him bail after the bail bond had been set. Impossible to like. Honorable Justice Kofayeni presiding, the clerk announced, "You may have your seats." Kofayeni resembled a wounded animal, and she cowered so often that Mike wanted to jump out of the dock to straighten her. She had been through the works, paid her dues, but had never had so much publicity in her courtroom. The press occupied nearly half of the courtroom crowd, and quite unexpectedly, Justice Kofo had allowed all manner of cameras in the court. Ephraim later explained that it was all in a bid to stall anyone who wanted to predict her actions. Mike thought it was all in a very bad taste. Ephraim had done his job well and done a background check on the judges that presided, from the appeal court judges to Kofo. Honorable Justice Kofo Ayeni, 59 years old, called to bar at the age of 20, was the youngest in her set, presides, prides herself as being very brilliant and unpredictable, divorced thrice, last divorced 20 years ago, pro capital punishment, and has sentenced over 10 men and women to the hangman, always went for the stiffest penalty at conviction. Defense almost never won with her, especially in criminal cases. Hates all men except her only son. Honorable Justice Mofe Damijo, 62 years old, called to bar at the age of 28, enjoys playing golf more than sitting in court, twice married with 7 sons, first wife committed suicide, has a soft spot for female children, pro capital punishment, was criticized for not sentencing female drug dealers to death, has no female child. Rumor has it that he has kept a mistress for over 30 years, has a bad habit of not showing up in his courtroom. He heard the appeal. Honorable Justice Tijani, 48 years old, just got appointed as a Court of Appeals judge, fervent and overzealous about his job, thorough and would unearth every tiny detail in his case, hardly sustains any objection, got born again after his call to bar at the age of 23, retained his birth name, anti-capital punishment, and heavily supports an NGO that preaches against the death penalty, married to a High Court judge and has 2 children, a boy and a girl, though it is rumored that the girl is a bastard, has a reputation of giving very fair judgments and sentences. He heard the appeal. Honorable Justice Chika Okoromadu, 52 years old, called to bar at the age of 23, widower with 6 children. His wife died a few days after he got conferred with son. Rumors ran round that she was sacrificed for the honor. Hates young lawyers, houses, and female doctors in that order. Anti-capital punishment, but very strict in his verdicts. He heard the appeal. Those were the judges appointed to the case. The 3 men presided over Mike's appeal. Their decision for a retrial had been unanimous. Kofo presided over the retrial. She was the worst of the bunch. Is the prosecution ready for their opening address? Yes, my lord. Please proceed. Unlike the High Court where Mike had been convicted, this court was quite big with plenty of room and leg space. Chief Prosecutor Barrister Okon Eno Okon decided to fill his stage. He ambled round the floor for a few seconds before he spoke. My lord, my learned colleagues, ladies and gentlemen of the press, all lovers of justice here present, good morning. I wondered long and hard as I prepared for this case. Why? Why would a felon, a confessed convict, wake up one day and suddenly realize he did not commit the offense for which he'd been convicted? It beat me. Today, we are not looking for justice. We already have it. A criminal offense was committed and a criminal charged for it. This is not a new case. But in our society, it is almost a taboo for a rich man to be convicted. And this is why I applaud our justice system. The accused suddenly woke up one day and realized the Nigerian justice system has changed. And in an attempt to drag us back to the old corrupt age, he wants to prove a point. But we are the ones that will prove that there is no case. My lord, the prosecution will provide evidence that clearly shows the accused was at the scene of the crime. The accused did hit the car that killed 2 persons. Eyewitness account testifies to this effect. We had a crime, a criminal's confession, and a conviction. And we are only here today to uphold and defend that conviction so that other men and women of influence in our society will realize they are not above the law. Mike Dabi is a shining example. Okon rounded up his speech, fixing his gaze on Mike, but Mike was miles away. He was in the Oman prison visitors' room, sharing a joke with Esam. His eyes were even half closed. Chapter 20. Before starting his opening address, Effiong moved a motion to have the handcuffs and leg cuffs removed from Mike, arguing that he was harmless and had nowhere to run. Okoneno objected the motion with venom before Justice Kofo could respond. He stated that the court was not in session to try a suspect, but an accused person previously fairly convicted by the Honorable High Court of Justice and the discretional judgment of a seasoned High Court. Mike was not innocent till proven guilty. He was guilty as charged, a criminal, a convicted killer. He could not be trusted. Justice Kofo sustained the objection, and Mike remained bound. Ephraim was appalled. The notion had been well taken, and Kofo ought to have granted the same, ordering the accused to be released from restraint. But Ephraim was unmoved. He proceeded to thank God for giving opportunity to hear Mike's appeal and the opportunity at a retrial. This is an unusual case, a clear-cut case of Jankara practice, a case of backstabbing and envy. Mike Dabi did not stand trial for the unfortunate slaughter of his first son, Michael Olasoji Dabi Jr., and Mr. Dotun Ojo. He stood trial for being good, for being a man of substance and a man of principle. He went on and on and on about how Mike was a philanthropist, a fair man, and also so much that even Mike started to get bored. The defense is going to shock this honorable court with evidences and witnesses that will prove beyond reasonable doubt that Mike Dabi was never meant to have been sent behind bars in the first place. We will present evidence showing that the accused made the plea of guilty at the formal trial in error, and the judgment was bad in having sufficient fact. Evidence from the Vehicle Inspection Office will reveal that, in fact, the deceased driver's car was in bad condition as he was driving with only one functional headlamp. Eyewitness reports will show this honorable court that the accused was on his side of the lane at the time of the accident. We will reveal also several other legal defenses, the contributory evidences of negligence and careless driving on the part of the deceased driver, and poor weather conditions. Thank you, he said suddenly, so forcefully, even Justice Kofo jumped in her seat. The judge called for a recess. When we come back, the prosecution will present its witnesses. She hit her gavel and stood up to exit. Mike was hushed out quickly as cameras flashed unheeded and taken to a small cell on the same floor as the courtroom. A small chair and table were inside the cell in case the convict needed to eat or deliberate. Mike asked for only one favor. Esam walked quietly into the cell and winced when she was locked in. Mike looked at her longingly. He had missed her beyond description. She wore another ash outfit, a long rayon skirt with high neck, short sleeve blouse. She couldn't admit to anyone that she'd gone to the market to buy the outfit just to impress Mike. He looked impressed, all right. It was written all over him. You were supposed to come last week, he said in that unforgiving tone she'd heard him use several times. He had fallen sick waiting for her. He had again bought over 3 hours for the visit. The previous visit he bought time from the warden. She had spent a mere 1.5 hours. There had been no refund then, and none again when she didn't show up at all. But money was not the issue. Her presence was. I'm sorry. She sat on the only chair in the cell. I got an emergency call at the hospital. One of my patients developed high fever and went into a coma, she explained quietly. He was just 2 years old. How insensitive of me, he whispered. What was wrong with him? We were not sure yet. His mother rushed him in saying that he took in some amount of gin. We had sent some samples of his blood and urine to the lab for tests. He presented all the symptoms of a condition called cirrhosis, which I had never seen in a child before. Not to talk of a child that young, because that meant he would have been taking this alcohol continually over a significant period of time. He was yellowing as though he had jaundice, and his liver was definitely sensitive. His stomach was swollen. We thought he would need a complete blood transfusion and made arrangements for that. He was in tremendous pain. I went home to change to see you while waiting for the test results to return when the call came. Just 2 years old? That's terrible. What did the tests reveal? It was inconclusive. We needed more samples to do more investigation. My first time of seeing that kind of thing in a child, that young too. My guess is they had been trying to treat him at home, probably with all these, their alcohol concoctions. The mother had first said it was the fault of the grandmother, who is a witch. She said somebly. How is he now? He was truly touched. Dead. She sighed. Didn't make it. Didn't have much of a chance. Accept my sympathy. His gaze remained transfixed on her. She looked so beautiful. Her hair, newly curled and partially covered, was left dangling about her head. He desperately wanted to run his fingers through. It was painful, she said, and looked at him. He looked sober. She remembered he had lost a child. He knew how painful it was. How are you? Are you okay? He knew he should have asked that first. Yeah, I'm okay. She sighed and smiled. She wasn't supposed to add gloom to the present situation. Can I touch you? He asked. Touch me? Fear gripped her heart. Touch your face. It's all right if you don't want me to. I guess you can. She shrugged uncertainly. There had been no physical contact between them before now, not even a handshake. He moved to stand behind her back and feeling her tense, gently ran his thumb across her cheek. She closed her eyes impulsively. The physical reaction was automatic, sudden, and ecstatic. She had never felt anything like it before. Feelings she couldn't describe dwindled around the bottom of her belly. Shivers ran through her body and she developed goosebumps. Her palms began to sweat where they lay limp on her laps. He brought his other hand and traced circles around her earlobe and jaw. His skin was cool and hard against hers, but she enjoyed his touch. She heard a soft moan and realized too late that it came from her. You're so beautiful, Esam, he murmured. His handcuffed hands left the side of her face and continued the circles, leaving tingling sensation along their path, down the side of her neck to her nape. He began to massage her neck and shoulder blades so gently. She almost didn't feel any pressure. A sigh escaped her lips as she tried to control these new feelings she had never imagined existed. Who would ever believe she was once married? Someone cleared his throat noisily, and Mike's eyes flew open. His hands dropped from Esam's shoulder abruptly. Ephraim was standing in the cell with them. They'd not even heard the key turning on the heavy metal gate. Esam jumped to her feet. Her embarrassment knew no bounds. Mike avoided looking at her to save her more embarrassment and to hide his own. He had never been so turned on in his life. His body was so hard, it hurt. He was sure the whole world could see it. Court is reconvening, Ephraim said. Mike moved as fast as the chains would allow out of the cell. Two policemen accompanied him while a third one waited to lock the cell. The recess had lasted only 30 minutes, but it had seemed like eternity for Esam. I'm sorry. She looked at Ephraim, feeling self conscious and ashamed. Don't feel bad, he said, so reassuring that she was almost convinced. We're going to take a little break. I'm going to drink water, catch my breath, invite people to join the live reading if you like my voice. Just a minute to drink some plenty water. Then, was that even up to a minute? I don't think so. Okay, let's continue. I'm enjoying this. Chapter 21. The Honorable Justice Kofayenim had made it clear to the council during the recess that she would not tolerate undue delay and rhetoric in her court. Court would sit every day for 2 weeks only, and if by then either side had not established their purpose, she would call for address and proceed to give her judgment. That sounded so bad, Ephraim did not want to imagine the consequence. The prosecution started by calling all the old witnesses, the PWs, or prosecution witnesses. The first policeman at the scene of the crash, PW1, the pathologist who declared the dead, PW2, and the doctor who treated the living, PW3. Then a surprise witness was called as PW4, someone new. It was the prosecution's joker to establish their case. The woman, Mrs. Josiah, was mother of the boy who'd been celebrating his birthday where Mike's children had been. She described at length how drunken Mike was. Mike couldn't recognize her. She was one of Sandra's many acquaintances, one of those women who associate just for what they can get from you. Mike wondered how much they had given her to come all the way from Lagos to testify against him. Sandra had also testified against him. It was her tearful testimony that had convinced the judge he deserved the maximum penalty. In addition to the woman's elaborate description of the scene at her house on the night of the crash, she reiterated her repeated plea for Mike not to go with the boys and, in fact, not to drive at all that night because he was dead drunk. Ephraim jumped up for the kill at cross-examination. Mrs. Josiah, are you aware that the accused has changed his plea from guilty to not guilty? Ephraim surprised the woman with his question. I am aware. Are you aware that the allegation of accused person on his former guilty plea was predicated upon wrong professional advice from his former lawyer? That's what you claim, she said spitefully. That this contestation of accused person has been confirmed and upheld by the Court of Appeals, hence this retrial. How does this concern me? Please answer the question, Ephraim snapped. Yes, now, yes. Mrs. Josiah, it beats me that you travel all this distance to give a testimony at this trial. Is there a private reason to this end that you wish to disclose to this court? I have no private reason for coming. Did you and the accused ever relate before the incidents? No. Did you know the accused before the day of the incident? No, but his wife is such a wonderful. I will ask you about that if I need the information. Ephraim cut in sharply. Is it not true that you were paid by the enemies of the accused to come and lie before this honorable court? I will never lie under oath. I am a good Christian, Mrs. Josiah ceased. Is it not true that you have been envious and malicious towards the accused ever since you got to know him through his wife? No, that you, in fact, plot to bring him down in any way you can because of your jealousy? Of course not. How much are you gaining by sitting in that dock today? I am not. Objection, my lord. Counsel is badgering the witness. Okoneno backed. Sustained. You had an alcohol intoxication problem before, didn't you? Ephraim asked softly. No, I dealt with that. Did you ever have a drinking problem? It was not really. Please answer yes or no. I really can't say that. I believe that since you can't even accept you had a drinking problem, you wouldn't be able to identify a drunk when you see one, Ephraim said and chuckled. A few people took the joke well. I know a drunken person when I see one, Mrs. Josiah said tartly. In fact, you were drunk on the night of the incident yourself, were you not? Ephraim asked. Mrs. Josiah began to stammer and the court erupted in laughter. Kofo hit her gavel once. Order, the bailiff shouted. Ephraim relaxed and smiled. One last question, Mrs. Josiah. Why, with such a damaging testimony as yours, did you not testify when this case was first being heard in Lagos? He meant it to be the final hammer on her. Her response did more damage than her testimony. Because my Dabi, the defendant, had taken responsibility and pleaded guilty to his crime, she said with spite, it was her reprisal. I was ready, but the prosecutor did not need me there. Anywhere in the world they need me to testify, I will go at my own expense. His son and that poor dead man could have been alive today if he had heeded my advice, she said. Mike's eyes remained closed through the response. He felt like pushing rags into the woman's mouth. She was lying. He had never exchanged a word with her in his life. No further questions, my lord, Ephraim said, deflated. The prosecution rested after taking 4 days of the deadline the Honorable Justice Kofo gave them. Tactically, Okoneno had given defense 4 days also because it would be insensitive of the defense not to give the judge at least 2 days to reach her verdict. It was bad news for the case, but only God knew whether it was for or against defense. Prosecution had nothing to lose except their ego. Defense had the ego, the freedom, and probably Consel's career at stake if things went wrong. And Kofo, in her erratic behavior, could sway toward any side. She was just eccentrically unpredictable. Chapter 22. Esam needed to get things straight once and for all. She asked Amma and Ephraim to accompany her, and they all went to her parents' family house for dinner. The family house was set on 5 hectares of land. Over the years, the sons had divided the land amongst themselves and built low fences to demarcate their portions, but the whole community still stood as one. It was more like a housing estate. The main house, which Esam's father's father had inherited from his father, remained sturdy and strong. It was a glory to behold. A trust fund had been set up along the lineage to maintain the house, and Esam's father kept strictly to it. Already he was grooming his first son on how to take over the property. It had become a god in the family. Esam's father was a typical aristocrat. From a royal family, he had brought his children up with an iron hand, training them to insist on receiving the treatment of royalty. Esam's father was an authoritarian. His word was law. He had only relented hold on them a little as they got married. But even at that, it was still a task to have a mind of your own. He was the Lord and Master, and his word was final over the lives of all his 6 children except Amma. Amma was the black sheep, and though she had turned out all right, their father still had an aversion toward her. It was natural in the family to assume he hated his second two. Mrs. Mary Enshaw, Esam's mother, a quiet and unassuming woman, had prepared ekpankoko, the traditional water yam dish that was renowned for stealing husbands in Calabar. Mary Henshon knew how to prepare it well. She had long discovered different secret formulas that made her special, along with all the dry fish, stockfish, crayfish, snails, and variety of meat she added to the dish. Mfi was usually added both shelled and unshelled. It was Esam's favorite dish. No one expected more than a family briefing of the much publicized lawsuit on Mike's appeal. The elder Enshaws had not been told why their twins were coming over for dinner. As usual as it was, it particularly felt unusual. The weather was fine after a particularly sunny day. Everyone wanted to unwind. Dinner was served by Mary and the twins, and they settled down to eat. I don't know which day your ekpan will taste so nice. Ama, Ephraim rebuked, his mouth full. I don't know what mom does. I've tried to copy her, no luck, Amma replied, catching a small unshelled infi with her tongue and holding the tip to suck it. Even me too, Esam said. This is so nice. Mary laughed, delighted. You modern day children don't have the patience to prepare it. Ekpan is not a 2 hour or 3 hour dish. It takes the whole day, she said happily. But this one even tastes nicer than your usual. And I know you will not use more than one knorr cube, Amma said, licking her fingers noisily. I'll tell you the secret. I soaked the stockfish in salt water overnight, Mary said conspiratorially. What? Esam exclaimed. Then use the water to cook it. I also fried everything, the meat, snail, pepper, even the nkoriko. Mary continued. Who could have imagined? Of course, you know I don't use dry pepper. Everything is fresh, except the crayfish, stockfish, and dry fish. Are we having a catering class here? Esam's father bellowed, washing down a large piece of dry fish with palm wine. Etubom, please, let them learn, or else I'll come and marry your wife, Effiong said teasingly. And yes, I did all the frying with palm oil, Mary added. Oh, gracious me, Mom. Mom even fries egg with palm oil. The two girls laughed. Dinner was over and the girls helped their mother wash up. Ever since the last child in the family went to boarding school, Mary had refused to get help around the house. Her husband had refused to. Their lives are back to the early days when they just got married. Just the two of them were in the house. Etubom, please, we'd like to have a talk with you, Esam said nervously as they came back into the sitting room. It was a large room that had not changed in the past 30 years. The furniture, though worn, was clean and well maintained. The twins had tried to modernize the furniture in the house, but their father would have none of it. Yes, is all well? Etubom asked. Yes, well. No. She looked at her twin for help. Amma was the outspoken one, more like their father in more ways than the Etubom could bring himself to admit. It was part of his effort to detach his children from him that he insisted they refer to him by his chieftaincy title, Etubom, rather than dad. But Amma called him dad. Esam was like their mother, quiet, unassuming, unforgiving, but she took whatever came her way, good and bad, without reaction. Dad, Amma sat up. Etubom snickered like he usually did when she addressed him. Esam just wants to ask a simple question, and that is, Amma ignored his attitude. If it's Esam who has the question, why are you the one asking? Etubom interrupted, intimidating. Dad, Etubom turned sharply. Esam was looking directly at him. Dad, she said more confidently, I just want to know why you gave me to Etubom Bassey as his wife. He was your father's friend. He was much younger than my father. He was much older than you, Amma said angrily. They had never been able to understand why their father agreed and forced Esam to marry the old man. Rumors had gone around that Esam was the price for their father paid to be elected into the council of Etubom because Chief Bassey was a kingmaker. But the twins had never had the boldness to confirm it. Now they wanted the truth. Amma, I will not stand your overbearing attitude tonight, Etubon growled. Mom, why? If Dad will not explain, at least you can, please, Esam said. I did what I thought was best for Abasesa. It turned out all right, the 60-year-old man said simply. It did not turn out all right, Dad. Esam went through hell in that marriage. And now she's free. She looks all right to me. Besides, what was so bad was Chief Bassey flogging her. Etubom asked incredulously. He wondered why the girls were bringing the issue up. It was over 6 years since Etubom Bassey passed on. No, but his daughter slapped her at will. His sons used belt to beat her. Amma saw angrily. Oh my God, Mary exclaimed. And I'm not barren. Chief, Chief Bassey had sex with me 5 times in 7 years of marriage. Esam sobbed. I just want to know why you gave me to him. I did what I thought was good. The two girls had never heard their father sound so strained. Well, you were wrong. It was the worst decision any man could have made. Amma grounded out. Your father and I were worried for you girls. You two are so beautiful. We were afraid you would fall into the hands of these irresponsible young men. Is it true Esam was the price Chief Bassey asked for to install your chieftaincy? Definitely not. Then you owed him a great deal of a great deal, as the grapevine alleged. Esam shouted, I made my mistakes. I regret them. Please don't rub it in, Littlebomb said. It was the closest he'd ever come to apologizing for anything. No one could say a word after that. Esam sobbed loudly. Mary joined in quietly. Amma just sat stunned, unable to believe that their father would refuse to own up for anything. Ifyom had even been too upset to say anything through the conversation. I'm going to take another break to drink water. Just water. Thank you. Let's continue. Chapter 23. Defense called its first witness, Michael Dabi, the accused, DW1. Ifyom led him to establish his identity and status in life before his incarceration, and at current, he posed a pathetic image, a true picture of real grace turned to real grass. Carefully, they treaded the paths that preceded the accident. Ifyom established his state of mind, the nature of the road, the state of the weather, the state of the traffic on the said night. It was a grueling trip, but one that landed them safely where Ifyom wanted them. Any sane person in the court would agree that at the time of the accident, Mike was at least not reckless, even if they couldn't quite accept that he was not drunk. This was after Ifyom carefully defined as in law reckless driving or recklessness on the road as an attitude of mental indifference to obvious risk culpable in law. Okon Eno carefully avoided any objections throughout the testimony, but at cross-examination made all sorts of allegations of immorality and reckless living dating as far back as Mike's university days. He succeeded in exposing the youthful escapades Mike had indulged in as a youth, including several abortions he had made his old girlfriends commit. At the end, he concluded that Mike had still not changed from the drunken, reckless, carefree youth he was, and was finally reaping the fruits of horrible living. Mrs. Rosalind Dabi, the mother of the accused, was called in as the second defense witness, the DW2. Okoneno flew to his feet, backing an objection. This is a retrial, my lord. This witness has not been within reach for the full period of the convict's incarceration. I don't know what she could have to say that will be of relevance to this case, he shouted. I assure you, my lord, this witness is very relevant, and I am set to prove it, Ifyom said calmly. I'll allow the testimony, Judge Kofo said dryly. Mike had a first glimpse of his mother in 4 years. She had aged and she was rolled into court in a wheelchair. He avoided her gaze as a lump formed in his throat. He hadn't known she would be called upon to testify, and he had not known she was confined. Rosalind Dabi took an oath with a hand on the Holy Bible and then proceeded to answer questions posed to her, beginning with her age and occupation. The accused person is your son, whom you love dearly. Can you tell this court what your true impression is about his character and habits? Mike is a very good boy. Man, he's very responsible and hardworking. What about his preferences for pleasure? He enjoys staying in the house and watching films, playing with his children and family. He's usually very calm and friendly. Will you say he is a sober and level-headed man? Yes. Objection, my lord. Counsel is leading the witness. Mr. Ofion, get on with it. Objection sustained, Kofo said. Yes, my lord. At the time of the incident, where were you? I was in Lagos visiting with my son, Mike. What time did he leave the house? It was in the morning. Did you see him before he left the house? Yes. What was he like? He was sober as usual. He left in the morning and told all of us in the house he will be back in the evening. Was that a usual behavior? Yes, very normal. He was very normal. When he comes back in the evening, is he usually drunk or tipsy or unusual? Objection, my lord. Calls for speculation. Sustained. I'll rephrase the question, my lord. Have you seen your son drunk before? No, I have known him all his adult life. He never once got drunk. He was a very stable and responsible person. Was he drunk, tipsy, or unusual in any way when he left the house that morning? Objection, my lord. Counsel is unnecessarily stretching the point and wasting the time of this honorable court. Sustained. Tell us briefly, Mrs. Dabi, the events that has occurred since your son, Michael Olasoji Dabi Sr., was convicted and sentenced accordingly for the manslaughter of two persons, one of which is your beloved grandson, Effiong asked. Mike took the courage to look at his mother for the first time. She seemed strong and well composed. He made eye contact with her as she made to answer the questions and nodded a respectful greeting. She was encouraged. She cleared her throat before giving her reply. After my son was taken to prison, my husband had a stroke. He was shattered. He died from the stroke. Accept my sympathy if you mumbled. What happened to other members of the family? He asked. Objection, my lord. We are not here to catch up on events in the Dabi family, Okon Eno said irritably. Will you allow us to hear this testimony, Mr. Okoneno? Judge Kofo gritted between her teeth. Please answer the question. Objection overruled. My other children went into self-exile. It has been hard to take on the family. Mike was the breadwinner of our large family. Have you lost any other member of the family? No, Rosalind shook her head. What about Michael's immediate family? Objection, my lord. What is the relevance of this line of questioning? The learned counsel for the defense should allow the witness DW to tell her story herself and not spoon feed the witness, my lord. My lord, I will establish relevance shortly. And these questions are harmless in law, my lord. Overruled. Proceed. Okoneno hissed and sat down. Behave yourself, counsel, Judge Kofo warned. I guess they should be fine, Rosalind said. You guess? Can you categorically say they are doing better than your immediate family? My lord, I object this question. Okoneno rose to his feet, slowly and angrily. Counsel, approach the bench, Judge Kofo demanded. The two men moved forward to stand before the judge. I will not have this ungentlemanly behavior in my courtroom. Defense, you will establish your point now, or I'll hold you in contempt, she said. The two men walked sulkily back to their seats. Objection sustained. Defense counsel will establish the relevance of this line of questioning immediately, she beat out. Mrs. Dabi, please relate to this court your current relationship with your son's immediate family. If you're backed as though to take his anger out on Rosalind. Mike cringed. I have been neglected, a poor widow. Mrs. Dabi began to sob. My daughter-in-law does not allow me to even see my grandson. If you turned to look at the audience briefly as though to say, see what they have done to the poor woman. It was meant for the press and it worked. Why would you think she neglected you? Objection, assumption of motives. Sustained. She set my son up. That is why she's avoiding me. Okoneno was on his feet shouting, Objection, my lord. Judge Kofo hit her gavel several times. Counsel, you will lead your witness properly. Any further thing to say? No further questions, my lord, Ephraim said wearily. Cross-examination? Madam, you have been through a lot of stress and I sympathize with you also, Okoneno said with surprising composure. I have just one question. Is it true that you blacklisted the wife of your son, called her a witch, and warned her that if she ever comes to your house, you will kill her? No, I never said that. No further questions for this witness, my lord. Okoneno caught Rosalind rudely and went back to his seat with a scowl on his face. Mike detested him. Court adjourned till the following day. Ephraim was shocked. He had thought he would be able to present up to 3 witnesses. No doubt it was Okoneno's plan to upset the judge so much with his objections. As the court dispersed, Mike was led toward the exit. Ephraim and his team followed him. The press was waiting to pounce on them as usual. Ephraim was ready for them. He made snide remarks about the prosecution and reiterated his confidence in winning the case. Mike caught his attention as he was being put into the Black Maria. I need to see Esam, please. Arrange it, he whispered into Ephraim's ears. Water break. Maybe a bathroom break for us as well. So I'm just going to be here. If you like my reading, please let me know. Subscribe, comment, share, like. Thank you. Thank you. I think I need to refill my cup as well. Yep. So I also discovered that water has no taste, but it's nice. It has no taste, but it's nice. And if you add a little lemon, it's nice. All right, let's resume reading. Chapter 24. Esam was found in the doctor's room at the teaching hospital sharing a bottle of Coke with another pediatrician. She was relaxed and chatting happily when Ephraim walked in. He spotted her at once. After exchanging pleasantries, he pulled up a seat and sat with them. Esam did the introductions. Dr. Asa Agantem, meet my sister's husband, Barrister Ephraim, Esam said. Oh, yes, Dr. Asa Agantem said, smiling. I was trying to place the face. You've been on TV recently. I've been following that case at the High Court. She said cheerily. That's right. Ephraim smiled pleasantly. If there was anything he had achieved, it was the publicity he'd created. He had spent a fortune, but it was worth every dime. Even if they lost at this stage, they could conveniently go on appeal to the highest court of justice in the land, the Supreme Court, and anything could happen from there. He was frequently recognized in most places he went to now. That was very good. Femi Williams, SAN, quite out of character, had allowed the case to be heard without the pomp and pageantry the retrial was enjoying. If a man as philanthropic and productive as Mike Dabi was going to be taken out of circulation, it was only fair that his people, whom he loved dearly, should be aware, so that if there was an injustice, the court of the people could raise the alarm. Coincidentally, my cousin stays in one of the estates built by Mr. Dabi in Lagos. No one ever knew he was in jail for anything. Incredible, Ephraim said. The edge in his voice spelled impatience, though he was actually just tired. He was fagged out, and he simply wanted to go home and sleep. Esam sensed it at once. Conducting the defense within the 4 days he had was energy-sapping and tiring. I hope it turns out all right, she sighed. Would you like a drink? If it's chilled. It is. I'll get you a bottle of malt drink. Esam stood up. Doc, will I see you before you go home? She asked her friend. I'll be in ICU. Nice meeting you, Effiam said quickly. Dr. Asa Agantem was very intelligent. She stood up, her bottle of Coke half empty. Nice meeting you, she said emphatically. I hope we get together sometime and talk about the case. I'm sure Esam can fix that. Thanks. Effiam stood up and shook her hand. She was a nice person and he wished he were really in the mood to talk. Esam came back with a cold can of Guinness malt and a straw. How was Scott today? She asked. Mike asked to see you again. You can't avoid him forever. You can't keep running. What happened? She coughed. He asked for you even though his mother was in court today and she'll be going back tomorrow. He asked for you. He hasn't seen her in all 4 years of his incarceration, but he asked to see you. Look, what happened was strange, unexpected, maybe a little embarrassing, but I didn't expect you to react like this. You have to move on and explore all possibilities at your happiness. Possibilities at happiness? With who? A convicted felon? A Sam hissed. I saw your face that day in court. Your eyes were closed, but I read volumes. Ephraim, please. No, listen. I know you are embarrassed, but you can feel free to talk about this. Esan looked around nervously. No one paid attention to her. I feel so ashamed for what I did, what I felt. There's nothing wrong in feeling. You didn't imagine it will happen, Ephraim said. You didn't plan it. And that's why you shouldn't run away from it. I can't, Ephraim. Esam struggled to hold back her emotion. She really wanted to scream and hit her head on the wall. Esam, listen to me. Probably he wants to apologize to you. I don't know. But whenever he gets out of jail, he's going to come after you. If you don't settle this, if he gets out of jail, you're counting on winning this case, and it's only a probability. That's your fear, isn't it? You're not sure he's ever going to get out, so you don't want to put your heart on the line. I don't, I understand that line of thought, but you can still see him now, hear what he has to say, and then draw your conclusion. I think he just wants to apologize to you for that day. Why are you talking for him? You don't even know him. Esam got offensive. I'm not talking for him. I'm concerned about you. I've watched you, Esam, ever since I met you. Do you remember the first day we met? You just married Etu Bombasi then. You were so naive and trusting. My heart ached because I knew that marriage was going to hurt you. Ephraim said, looking intently at her. I've grown up since then. I don't think so. I think you've detached yourself completely from having human feeling for anyone. I see Mike Dabi bringing you out of it. You don't have to fight him. I'm not fighting. Ephraim, please understand me. I just want to live my life and be happy. I don't want to hurt again. This time, Esam allowed the tears to silently curse its way down her face. It's all right, Esam. All will be well. I just don't want to be hurt again. She sniffed and wiped her face. You have to allow yourself to move on. You have to believe the best. Have faith. Ephraim looked at her face, hoping she would draw strength from him. He needs you, Esam. He needs you right now, more than ever. I'll have to think about this, she sighed. Her heart felt heavy and sad. Ephraim left the doctor's room without touching his drink, more tired. Water break. Thank you for joining me in this live video, and thank you for watching. If you didn't join but you're watching it later on, thank you. Please subscribe, share, like, comment. Let's engage. Tell me what you think about scent of water. Okay. All right. Let's move on fast. We have two more chapters to go. So hang in there. You can still invite your friends to join this live reading. Chapter 25. Defense called the police officer on patrol on the night of the incidents. Ephraim had kissed Amma long and hard when she presented the witness to him. The officer's testimony was very crucial to the case. The said officer was a sergeant who had been on patrol with Operation Sweep on the night of the accident. He testified to seeing and stopping Mike on the road a few kilometers to the scene of the accident. The accused was conversant and alert. We chatted briefly and I let him go. After a failed attempt by Okoneno at cross-examination to establish that the officer was bribed to give the testimony, he rested. There was also an officer from the Vehicle Inspection Office who testified that the deceased had a record of road offenses and had even been booked earlier in the day of the incidents for driving with only one functional headlamp. The testimony was brief, straight to the point, evidential, and Okon-Eno did not cross-examine. DW5 was a medical expert who took care of Mike on admission to the casualty ward immediately after the accident. The doctor established that Mike had taken some alcohol, but the level of intoxication was so low he couldn't have even been tipsy. Okon-Eno had little to say to the expert. After the expert testimonies, the court adjourned for a 30-minute recess. Defense called Mr. Suleiman Ahmed. He took his oath with a holy Quran. Mr. Ahmed, please state your occupation. I am a trailer driver. How many years have you been driving a trailer? Over 20 years now. Can you state exactly how many years? I cannot exactly, but I know it's more than 20 years. How many accidents have you had in your 20 plus years of driving a trailer? None. Not one? Not one. Impressive. Do you work in a particular company or you are a freelance? Free, go. I mean, do you move from company to company? I have worked only in one company. Can you state the name of the company for this honorable court? Young Suko Group. What do they produce in Young Suko Group? It is a transport company. We transport for other companies. Are you still in their employ presently? Yes. You must be a very good and faithful driver to have worked with Young Suko Group for so long. I try my best. On the evening of September 8, 2001, where were you? I was in Lagos. Are you stationed in Lagos? No. So what were you doing in Lagos? Okon-Eno sat mute, fiddling with his pen. I was there to deliver goods from the port, Sule said simply. Where are you stationed? Our offices are all over the country, but my family lives in Sokoto. Were you picking up goods from Lagos to take to Sokoto? I move around a lot. That particular period, I was picking goods from Lagos to take to Uyo and Calabar, and picking goods from Calabar to Kano. Our journeys are very funny, Sule said, and laughed at no joke. Ephraim smiled. Sule was a simple-looking man in his middle age. Ephraim didn't think he had much education, but he communicated very well. When Amma had found him, she had been stunned at the extent of his knowledge. His discovery was a mark of Amma's professionalism and a major chance for their case. What is the registration number of your vehicle? AA1234KJA, Lagos State. Describe the vehicle. It's a trailer 911. It's a very long one. We use it to transport all sorts of things from potatoes to palm oil and tires and plastic. It's a big engine. Are you the only one who drives this particular vehicle or are others driving it too? No, I alone drive this vehicle. I've driven it now for 8 years. It's a strong engine. It was obvious Sule loved his job. Back to September 8th, 2001, a ghastly accident occurred on that day. It claimed 2 lives. Were you aware of this? Yes. You were at the scene of the accident? I was driving. I did not stop to watch the accident. You drove past the accident? No. One of the cars with only one headlamp was trying to overtake me. It ran headlong into the oncoming vehicle. Sule disclosed. There was a roll of groaning all over the courtroom. Okoneno, who seemed to have been dozing, sat up. Mike's head drooped. That was the darkest night of his life. Your vehicle was the one they were trying to overtake. If you feigned ignorance for emphasis, this witness was indeed very relevant. Yes, the driver of that car died instantly. May his soul rest in peace, Ephraim said solemnly. There was another murmur in the courtroom. The driver of the other car is standing trial today in this courtroom for the casualties in that dreadful accident. Mr. Ahmed, how would you describe the driving and speed of the man who tried to overtake you? Objection, my lord. The dead man is not on trial here. We need to know the mind frame of the deceased as much as that of my client while they were driving, my lord. Mr. Sule seems to be in a position to provide evidence vitally in this case, or a good guess. I'll allow it. Please answer the question. Objection overruled. He seemed impatient. He had attempted to overtake me several times. Once I had to enter the other lane to block him because I saw a vehicle coming. He was driving with only one headlamp on. It was late in the night. It was raining and he was speeding. I remember wondering if he was drunk or in some kind of emergency. When he did finally start to overtake you, did you not see the other vehicle coming ahead? No, we were approaching a bend and I wanted to concentrate on that. I slowed down and the next thing, I heard a big bang. I looked through my mirror and saw there had been a collision. Sule swallowed. He had felt so terrible that night. If you were to assess the accident, who would you hold responsible for that accident? Objection, my lord. Overruled. I will blame the man that was trying to overtake me. Thank you, Mr. Ahmed. I have no further questions, my lord. Court will adjourn till tomorrow, Judge Kofo said and hit on her gavel. Court! The court bailiff shouted, and all rose. Ephraim couldn't believe cross-examination would not be immediate. They had no witness protection program, and Ephraim feared Okoneno would corner the semi-literate driver before the next day. It was so unfair. Ephraim had a very bad night and got to court in a foul mood. The session resumed without any waste of time. Okoneno looked fresh, strong, and enthusiastic, ready to slaughter. He wore a crisp white shirt under black and white striped suit. Looking at his bulging stomach, Amma thought pot-bellied lawyers ought to be this bad. There was a smirk on his face, and he greeted his learned colleague, Ephraim. All rise. The Honorable Justice Kofo Ayeni, Honorable Judge of the Federal High Court, presiding. Judge Kofo entered the courtroom regally and looked around. All seemed normal. The accused she had unimpressed by living in chains stood calmly in his dock behind the seats of the rival attorneys. The courtroom was filled to capacity as was expected. More than half of the spectators were pressmen from all over the country, poised with their cameras, recorders, pens, and paper. The court stenographer sat still with her pencil while the artist sat behind a drawing board. Is prosecution going to cross-examine the defense witness? Judge Kofo asked as soon as she assumed her elevated seat. Yes, my lord. Okoneno did a small bow. The judge ordered the clerk of the court to call the DW6, Mr. Sule. Mr. Ahmed once again took his oath to speak the truth, only the truth, and nothing but the truth, so help him God. Prosecution should proceed, Judge Kofo said calmly. Yes, my lord, Okoneno said almost excitedly and stood up. Mr. Ahmed, can you remind this courtroom of the number of years you served as a driver with Young Suko Group? 23 years. You were not so sure yesterday. I went back to calculate. Why? Why would you want to know? I was embarrassed that I did not know yesterday. I see. So, as at the time of the incident, you were roughly 18 years in service? Sule's lips moved for a brief second. Yes. Do you remember what you ate on the morning of September 8th, 2001? I don't usually eat breakfast. What about lunch on that day, your first meal, whenever it was? No, I didn't think you would. Can you tell this court what you did exactly between the hours of 9 p.m. and 10 p.m. on 6th September 2001? 6th of September. Sule thought for a few minutes and shook his head. I can't remember that right now. What about last month on the 8th? I don't. Can you tell us about your activities 2 weeks ago? What about your activities last week? Objection, my lord. Counsel is hounding the witness. Sustained. The prosecution is advised to tailor his cross examination to the facts of this case, Justice Kofo remarked. In fact, Mr. Ahmed, you really couldn't remember what happened on September 8th, 2001 until the defense team found you and came to jolt your memory. I remembered a little. Exactly, just a little. What you remembered was not enough to use in this retrial. You had only the skeleton. They added flesh to it for you. Is this not true? Objection, my lord. Sustained. Counsel will ask no more insinuating questions and make no further assumptions on the character of the witness outside of the facts of this case. Forgive me, my lord, Okoneno said quickly. Mr. Ahmed, can you tell this court in all truth that you remember the details of the occurrence on the night of September 8th, 2001? I remember a little, Sule said, vividly confused. Was the majority of the occurrence of that day remembered by you? No. Sule shook his head. In fact, Mr. Ahmed, defense counsel had to remind you of almost all that occurred that night, true or false. Well, yes, somehow. No further questions, my lord. What are... I'm reading chapter 26 now, and it's the last chapter for this live reading. I know this has run long a little bit, but this will be done. And if you missed it at the beginning, you can just go back and get it. And if you missed, because this is chapter 26, you could go back, get chapters from chapter 1. Okay, thank you. A little more water. Chapter 26. Defense calls Mrs. Amma Offiong, private investigator for the defense, DW7. Amma took the witness stand and took the oath. Effiong proceeded to question her on issues that would establish her qualification as an investigator since she was not in the police force. Mike could not take his eyes off her. She was a splitting image of her twin. The voice was the same, the mannerisms and gesticulations were also the same. He had never noticed they were so much alike. He ached for Esam, and seeing Amma only aggravated his need. Effiong had bluntly told him not to bother himself about her again. She did not want to see him. He had comforted him, though, that after the trial was won, he could still go and find her. It was a very poor attempt at reassurance. It solely depended on vindication. If he did not get one, he would be back in Alabama City, and he couldn't even afford that thought. He couldn't bear to have that thought. For the umpteenth time, he regretted subjecting himself to the whole process. He had done it for her, and now she didn't even want to see him. Can you tell us as elaborately as possible what you found about the crash investigations on this case without wasting the time of this honorable court? Effiong asked. Amma went into great detail of facts preceding the accident and of the scene of the accident. One would almost believe she was there herself. Would you say the accused got a fair trial the first time around? Objection calls for personal opinion and not facts of the case. I'll withdraw the question. No, he did not, Amma said stubbornly. My lord, Okone assault. Objections sustained. I'll pretend you didn't answer that question, Mrs. Offiong. Strike out her reply from the records, Judge Kofo said, annoyed. There was a murmur around the court. Mike smiled to himself, oblivious of the steely gaze of the judge on him. When he looked at her, the smile disappeared and a chill enveloped him. She hit on her gavel once. There will be order in this courtroom. Mrs. Offiong, will you answer only questions that are, I understand, my lord, Amma said tauntingly. I have no further questions for the witness, Effiong said, and took his seat. Okon Eno remained seated for a few seconds as though he was unaware of Effiong's retreat. Are you cross-examining this witness? Judge Kofo asked irritably. Yes, my lord, in just a moment, Okon Eno said, shuffling sheets of paper and suddenly getting very busy with his documents. Effiong was disgusted. The man was just trying to upset the judge and waste time all at once, he thought. When he finally got up, he went over all the questions Effiong had asked about Amma's qualifications again until Effiong was forced to object. Objection sustained. Move on with it, will you? We don't have all day, Judge Kofo said. She was already looking tired and Effiong panicked that she would adjourn again till the next day. He had only 2 days left with 6 witnesses that were crucial to their case. Mrs. Offiong, are you still married? Definitely. What is your husband's name? His name is Barrister Effiong Offiong. He is the defense counsel for this case and I work for him. Amma replied tartly. Of course, you seem to know all the questions I plan to ask you, but will you please just stick to answering the ones I ask only? I'm listening. Is it not true that you already rehearsed your answers with your husband and he has tutored you on exactly what to say? Okon Eno asked. I told you just now that I work for him, or are you hard of hearing? Don't be rude, Mrs. Offiong. Judge Kofo hit on her gavel as laughter erupted from the courtroom. Mike made sure he remained expressionless as he noticed the honorable judge was looking at him again. Answer the question, Okon Eno backed. Yes, I reported my findings and we talked about the relevance to the case, whether it would be admissible or not. It was purely professional. The findings were good to go for the case, and that's why I'm here, she shrugged. Is it not true that you made some of these so-called findings up just to help your husband win this case? The facts are there for all to see, and the facts are also corroborated by the testimony of other witnesses. I did not make anything up. And please stop referring to the defense counsel as my husband. In this court, he is the defense counsel, and I am a professional giving testimony in my area of calling. The court went up in an uproar. Judge Kofo hit a gavel several times but said nothing. This time, Mike didn't care if the judge stared or not. He smiled openly. He would later see the picture of that smile in top newspapers captioned diversely. A smile to victory, at ease in court, millionaire smile, a costly mistake. He almost regretted the smile. Mrs. Offiong, if your husband feels bad about my reference, he can object to it. You are to answer questions posed to you only. Okon Eno reprimanded softly. The joke was on him, and that was not funny. Effiong remained silent. Now, you are a qualified barrister, are you not? Okon Eno continued. Yes, I am. How long have you been at bar? I practiced law for 10 years after my call to bar with a private chamber owned by your husband. before I resigned to go full-time into investigative work. So you know procedures in the law court. Definitely. You do know what judges want to hear in cases and what can flaw or win a case. I have a good idea. You are just acting here to win this case, are you not? No, I am not, Amma said calmly. Effiong controlled himself. He would not object, though he knew Okoneno purposely wanted him to. How much were you paid to do this job? Okoneno looked into a sheet of paper in his hand. Objection, my lord. Counsel is badgering this witness, Effiong shouted, unable to take any more. I'll answer the question. 250 grand. 250,000 naira. Now, that is a lot of money. Okoneno wowed. He was genuinely stunned. His informer had given figures 100 grand less. It is. It is a lot of hard work too. Are you compelled to find exactly what the defense wants you to find, considering you are being paid 250,000? It's exactly what he would do. I am a professional. If my findings were not good enough for the defense, I won't be here. Just get that, Mr. Prosecutor. Have you worked for other attorneys apart from your husband in your capacity as a private eye? Okoneno moved on quickly as Judge Kofo calmed the crowd again. Several. Were all your findings admissible in court? Not all. Are you trying to tell me that it is possible for you to investigate a case, collect 250,000, and then discover your findings are utterly useless to the case? That's exactly what I'm telling you. It has happened before. I have no further questions, Okoneno said abruptly. My lord, please permit one more question from the defense. Go on, Judge Kofo said. Effiong caught a glimpse of the shock on Okoneno's face. It was a question he had purposely reserved for the end, a question he had rehearsed with Amma. Counsels did that sometimes. They made sure they brought out the most important question after the cross-examination. Some judges disallowed it, but most judges indulged the counsel, especially if it was for the prosecution. Okoneno had not anticipated the move. As a professional investigator, please briefly summarize all your findings from the scene of the crash to the case and the judgment, Effiong said, picking his words carefully. From the scene of the crash, I found out that the accused, Mr. Mike Dabi, was not at fault. The other car was overtaking a long vehicle with only one functional headlamp, and he caused the accident. From the case, the defense attorneys did not advise the accused properly about his rights and options. They did not present any witnesses either. The judgment was fair considering that the fact that the honorable judge had no facts to work on in the defense of the accused. I summarized that the plea was wrong and the accused was misled. It was a clear case of conspiracy to oust the accused from his wealth and estates. I found that out from the way his wife and lawyers have neglected him completely in prison and from their upscale lifestyle after his incarceration. Amma concluded solemnly. It was the bomb. Okoneno practically slouched. Thank you. No further questions, Effiong said and sat down. Court will recess and readjourn in 30 minutes, Judge Kofo said. And that ends my live reading of my book, Scent of Water. I will be reading maybe 1 or 2 chapters tomorrow. I'm not sure. Just watch out. If I'm going to be able to read tomorrow, I'll definitely schedule it and you will get the notification. Please subscribe again to my channel. Like this video. Comment if you like the way I'm reading. If you don't like it, it's fine. You can also say you don't like it, and I will try and change my style. Advise me what I need to do, and also share the video. Thank you very much. Until tomorrow or maybe Sunday, we'll see. Bye. And say streaming and